Arun is our great hope within the State Department of Transportation because once, remember, it was a highway department. We have our ups and downs on where the different influences are, but he's done a great job at keeping us on track, keeping us informed, and certainly moving passenger rail along. And he did graduate from the University of Wisconsin. Couple degrees, but the important role he's played is 15 years now. God, right? Working for WisDOT with passenger rail involvement since 2006. And currently he's in the railroads and harbor section, including managing our contract with Amtrak for Hiawatha, policy planning, and he also serves several national committees for WisDOT, including Next Generation Equipment Committee, States Amtrak Intercity Passenger Rail Committee, States Passenger Rail Coalition, and he worked on the Midwest Regional Rail Initiative. So let's welcome Arun.
Thank you very much. Thanks again for having me. How am I going to go after Derek? I can't compete with his majestic voice and turn of the phrase.
Yes, you can.
But in all seriousness, we are extremely lucky in Wisconsin and in the Midwest to have Derek and Ray as our Amtrak, Ray Lang as our Amtrak Government Affairs representatives. They're working for us all the time. We're in contact with them on an almost weekly basis, and we wouldn't be where we are without them and the team in Chicago at Amtrak. And so thank you, Derek, for everything you're doing for the state of Wisconsin.
We love what we do. We love you guys.
I haven't seen at Amtrak such a strong support and initiative taken for expansion that we're seeing now, and they have really been supportive and been taking initiative to support the states and their efforts to improve services. And I think I haven't seen to a level that I haven't seen in the past. So it's really positive. The cost reductions that we're seeing, the Hiawatha service, are hugely beneficial. Really, in terms of expanding passenger rail on the regional routes at the state-supported level, operating costs and operating support reductions are one of the most important things. We're going to keep working with Amtrak and encouraging them to keep driving the cost down, because that's going to be, one of the #1 things that helps us expand passenger rail, increase frequencies, and expand new routes. Even if we can reduce the cost at the state level as well as at the national level of doing passenger rail. So I will get started here. I'm going to talk about current routes and expansion projects, the Amtrak build the TCMC, the Hiawatha 10-route trips. Also our Milwaukee Airport Rail Station project that we have going on now. Potential new throughway bus service, a little teaser. And then talk about the Wisconsin budget. So this is the first time I've met with you since our new administration. We have been in transition. We had a lot of work going on to transition to the new administration. And it's been very, very positive. There's really dedication to look at all options on the table in terms of transportation, in terms of improving our roads, public transit, passenger rail, the whole gamut. So we've had several meetings with the administration and had made a lot of progress. So the existing Empire Build, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think everyone knows it, but it's really already a success story. So when you talk about the TCMC, we're not starting on something new, and this really reduces the risk of TCMC and makes it a very viable route. A lot of other routes nationally. So over 100,000 riders annually just on the Chicago-St. Paul segment of the Empire Builder. That's comparable to other one round-trip routes that are considered very successful, like the Blue Water in Michigan, or other, I mean, Blue Water is a little more than that, but other one round-trip routes across the country. And the Empire Builder is already doing that. I mean, I've ridden the Empire Builder several times within the corridor on random weekdays and off-peak season, and the train is always packed. So I think it's really doing well. I think capacity has been reduced on it, but the train is always busy. Regional travel, 70% of on-offs in Wisconsin are going to locations within that Chicago to Twin Cities corridor. So people are already trying to use it for regional travel. The one round trip per day, obviously, everyone knows that limits transportation options, especially for business travel, regional travel, or business community. And as we all know, significant delays can occur eastbound when you're coming from Seattle and Portland. And that is a huge challenge for regional travelers and business travelers. And the TCMC is really going to address that issue. So getting to the TCMC, Twin Cities La Crosse-Milwaukee-Chicago second daily train. The plan is to serve all existing stations plus the Milwaukee Airport, operate at a maximum speed of 79 miles an hour. It would be a daytime running schedule that would complement the Empire Builder schedule. Leaving Chicago roughly around 9:25 is a few schedule options, but just to give you an idea. And arriving in St. Paul around 4:45 p.m. And then eastbound running St. Paul around the noon hour and arriving to Chicago in the evening. It has a 30-minute shorter travel time than the Empire Builder. And that's because of the nature of how regional trains operate and how the long distance trains operate. And it also will have, as Derek mentioned, more reliable and better on-time performance. CP rail, best close railroad there is, and it's a shorter distance than it originates in St. Paul. So the objective of the TCMC is to provide that schedule flexibility and reliability to make regional travel, to really meet the regional travel demand across the state, and address the latent demand for regional service on the corridor based on what we're seeing, the travel patterns we're seeing in the current Empire Builder ridership. We want to also expand transportation options in the corridor and strengthen multimodal connections between the communities. La Crosse, for example, community along the corridor, has very limited air service, a few flights per day, high cost, and one round trip bus, intercity bus serving it, going up to the Twin Cities Milwaukee. And are we really, with that level of service, supporting economic development and economic growth in a city like a community like that, or do we need to ramp up a bit? And you have Logistics Health, for example, downtown La Crosse with 900 people. Their ability to retain and attract employees, it just underscores the need to improve transportation options to continue that economic development and see communities like La Crosse. Provide an alternative to congestion tolls and parking when accessing Milwaukee, Chicago, and Twin Cities. Those are economic powerhouses and for companies that are located in Tacoma, La Crosse, or anywhere else along the corridor that need to have communications with companies in these cities. It's great. People do not want to, they have to go to downtown Chicago or even downtown Milwaukee, battle with the congestion and the tolls and parking, and they're looking for other options. And so the TCMC would help address those issues. And then also, again, supporting the tourism, economic development, jobs, as I mentioned. Benefits that, and I've already mentioned some of these, of why we're interested in the Twin Cities Milwaukee-Chicago. Again, the regional travel, the greater ridership on the additional train. Looking at the community level, the greater ridership with the additional trains means more people coming into the station communities and supporting local businesses there. There was an example in Columbus of a business in downtown that saw 5 to 10 customers from Amtrak every day. And when you're a small business operating on small margins, that's a big deal. And so what happens when you double the people coming into these communities every day for the Amtrak service? We are, as I said, addressing limited area city and rail options. I got ahead of myself. Help communities attract and retain business and jobs and increasing tourism dollars. So what do we need to implement the TCMC? We're putting in 79 mile an hour, 279 mile an hour, adding 270 mile an hour passenger trains on a single track railroad, basically. So there's infrastructure improvements that the host railroad will need in order for us to be able to say we're mitigating any delays to freight operations. We don't want to harm freight operations. They're extremely important to the state economy as well. We've gone through a planning process, we've gone through railroad simulation modeling, workshops with the railroads, and identified some infrastructure improvements to support the additional trains while maintaining freight performance and maintaining CP's ability to keep dispatching passenger trains so well at such a high on-time performance. Those includes new sidings, siding in La Crosse, track work in La Crosse, Monona, River Junction, a new crossover in Columbus, signaling improvements, and so on. And so we need federal and state funding to fund those infrastructure improvements. We will also need additional funding from states for the operating support. And that's a big deal. And the operating support is, of course, operating costs minus revenues. So we have about $6.8 million in the rail appropriation right now in our yearly budget. Probably need to, when you consider the shares from Minnesota to the operating support and others, well, we'll probably need to bump that up to about 8 or 8.5 million from the 6.8 per year to support the TCMC, in addition to the 7 round trip Hiawatha service that we're supporting with 6.8 now. That is around what anybody in the industry would expect for something like this. And we really have to look at what value are we getting for that investment, and is it a good deal for Wisconsin taxpayers? And we've really been digging into it and looking at this, and this one looks like it is a good deal for the economic benefits. The RPA, you're probably familiar, just did a return on investment study for the TCMC, and we found a 7-to-1 return on investment for this investment. So we're going to be doing a similar return on investment study, benefit cost analysis in the very near future. But it's going to be more conservative than that, but fully anticipate that it's going to show a positive return on investment for this service in particular. And that's very important. So when we talk about, well, there's this operating support that's going to have to be in future state budgets, very important that it shows a good return on investment for that investment. And we wouldn't do it if it didn't. So the progress to date we've made on the TCMC, the feasibility study, the forecast for ridership revenue cost, that's done. The operations analysis, that includes Amtrak's operations, how they would operate it, a couple different scenarios, and how the operation analysis for the freight railroad and what's needed to increase capacity. That's been done. We've done conceptual engineering of the improvements that I mentioned previously, and the capital cost estimates for that infrastructure. And we started the environmental clearance process on those. And the findings of all that, we found that there's going to be about 55 to 76 million in infrastructure costs total on the whole corridor in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and depending on what scenario, and that could change a little bit. And so the worst case for that 76 million, if we applied for a federal grant for final design and construction, and we wanted to have a 30% match from the states to the federal grant. The minimum required is 20%. If we wanted to have 30%, it would be more competitive. The worst case is we need about, and if we're only just for illustration purposes looking at Minnesota and Wisconsin contributions with an Amtrak contribution, we're looking at about the need for 10 to 12 million from each state in state funding to match the federal grant to do this. The ridership that was found to have comparable to similar corridors, very, very positive, 155,000 annually. Operating support is required, as I mentioned. Would become one of those state-supported routes that Derek mentioned, routes under 750 miles. And then I also, as I already mentioned, the strong return on investment that was found in the RPA study, and we're also going to be doing this in the study. So what's the next steps? First, I'll start off with the WisDOT position. As you may have known, the previous administration sort of warmed to the TCMC. The current administration is very supportive of the TCMC. They've sent a letter to the Secretary Thompson, WisDOT Secretary, and they sent a letter to the Minnesota DOT Commissioner, officially expressing Wisconsin's support and desire to move forward and pursue this and implement the service. So we've been working very well with Minnesota. At this point, we're going to continue working well with Minnesota. It's a very good relationship and very positive step for the TCMC there. So what do we have to do now? We have to complete the environmental clearance. As I mentioned, we started it. It's luckily, it does not look like it's going to require an EIS or an environmental assessment. Most of these improvements are going to be categorical exclusions, which significantly reduces the cost and time for getting this environmental clearance done so that we can get on with the final design and construction. So that's very good news. We also have to finish the service development plan. It's already been started. A lot of work that Amtrak has done towards that. This work can probably be done to get started now, and we do have money in our budget to get started now and approved to start if we get the matching funds from Minnesota in 6 to 9 months. So if state matching funding is secured in the budgets of Wisconsin and Minnesota, we will be able to apply for a federal grant for final design and construction and implementation of the TCMC. And that could happen later this year, next year, depends on when the federal grant programs that Derek mentioned are appropriated and available. And then finally, we apply for that grant for final design and construction.